Good afternoon, and welcome to the Keys to Living and Aging Well, Financial Wellbeing for a Long Life webinar. I'm Grace Sutherland Smith, Executive Director of AgeWell Middle Tennessee, and we're delighted that you're joining us today. Today's webinar is part of an AgeWell educational series that offers practical information and expert guidance on ways we can live and age well. Today's topic is financial well-being, something that is really important to plan for as more of us live well into our 80s, 90s, and possibly past 100. Our speakers will address key topics like having a trusted financial advisor, questions to consider when planning for retirement, navigating current market conditions and these uncertain economic times, and avoiding scams and financial exploitation. Before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to recognize our webinar partners who you see on this slide: Encore Ministry, Jewish Family Service, and the YMCA of Middle Tennessee. I'd also like to thank our webinar series sponsor, Greater Nashville Regional Council, and today's sponsor, Jackson, for making this webinar possible. Now I'd like to introduce you to our three panelists. Gary Collier serves as leadership team member at Nashville-based Pinnacle Bank and as the executive director and principal of the bank's investment division subsidiary, Pinnacle Asset Management. Gary has been working in investments and planning for more than 30 years and enjoys helping people and families plan for a satisfying retirement, learning what's most important for their future quality of life. Jacob Hodges is a certified financial planner and lead advisor at Premier Private Wealth in Brentwood, Tennessee. Jacob enjoys learning what is most important to new clients and helping them frame long-term goals from a financial perspective, then chart a path towards those goals. And our third speaker, Dr. Jenn Block, is Executive Director of Agilon Health and has served on AgeWell's Board of Directors since 2021. She has over 25 years experience in military and civilian healthcare, from the front line to executive offices. Dr. Block will be sharing her own experience and reflections on planning for her financial well-being and what she wishes someone would have told her in her 20s. That's something that she and I have talked about before. If you have any questions at all during while any of the speakers are talking, please feel free to add them in the Zoom Q&A at the bottom of your screen or the chat, and I will ask them of our speakers later in the webinar as time allows. Without further ado, Gary, tell us more about planning and saving for longevity.
Thank you, Grace, and thank you for including me in today's webinar. I'm thrilled and excited and honored to be a part of it. I guess I should start off by asking, really, when we hear the term longevity, what does it mean to us? It might mean a variety of different things to different people, but I think the answer is really very simple. I think is about planning for living too long. Part of my job as a financial consultant is to help individuals plan for aging and to really ensure a quality of life that is desirable and not fall short of expectations. I'll come back to the term quality of life a lot because I really believe that's really what it's all about. What is your quality of life? And, part of the longevity is planning and saving for retirement. And I believe that the best way to do that is through a trusted advisor and maintaining an active and living plan. One of the things I hope you can take away today is a trusted advisor. I think a trusted advisor would be someone you meet with regularly. And it's really important to have someone that you know and you understand your situation. A good advisor will know your family, understand your current situation, your future plans, your feelings about risk, and is a good communicator. And a trustworthy advisor is not a stock market prognosticator or a guru. A good advisor will allocate the money relative to a client's stage of life or current situation. If cash is the most appropriate place for that to be, that's where the advisor should do it. But having a trusted advisor is a very important thing. And a financial plan that an advisor is not a one-time document. It requires ongoing and updating and revision. It's tailored to the individual and takes into account and recognizes the variables associated with longevity. Let's explore that a little bit deeper. And Rochelle, if you could go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Some things to consider, really, as we take a look at our own lives and what we really want to understand, that how we're going to spend our lives down the road, or maybe you're already down that path to a certain degree, that it's all unique and everybody's different. No plan fits all. I kind of always look at it as if you go to the grocery store and you look in somebody else's basket, they don't have the same foods that you have in your basket. And it's the same way as it relates to retirement planning. Everybody's grocery basket is different from your neighbor's. And what your plan looks like is up to you. It has to do with things where you see yourself living. What do you enjoy doing? What are some of your activities? I like to say that when you're planning, it's a lot more than an art than a science. And it involves some listening and that connection with that trusted advisor. And once you begin, but what it's important to understand is you can plan for your retirement and you go through all these things and you put these numbers together as part of the art. But the reality often sits in. Once you start to take distributions from your retirement plan or distributions from your pension plan, the numbers become a lot more real. As people approach longevity, many questions should be considered. And I think one of the main numbers that people think is, what about my money? How long will it last? We don't know for sure. We can't foresee everything, but it ought to be an educated guess. A well-established trusted advisor will help you to determine the probabilities of how long the money could last. And if you waited too late to save, there's some ways you can catch up. Unfortunately, there is no substitute for time. However, certain retirement plans, well, every retirement plan allows you the opportunity for catch-up contribution during your working years to save more. If you haven't saved enough, you should reevaluate possibly your lifestyle, consider downsizing, expenses, budgets, and do those types of things. But once you get there, where you start to take those distributions, the plan is kind of in motion to a certain degree. But you can catch up in your 50s because your plans allow you to save a little bit more. The next thing you want to do on a plan is, I think the most important thing is you have to determine your needs, wants, and sometimes wishes. How much cash do I need to live with? And it's not determine how much money's coming in, it's how much you need. I consider wants is kind of how much is the basics. Then the basic needs is the basics, and wants would be vacations, helping pay tuitions and those type of things. Needs are just the primary stuff, okay? And then you can add in your wants and wishes and determine that how much do you need. The second question you need to ask yourself, that sometimes people miss, am I protected from harm? Every day we read in the newspaper of the latest scams against the elderly. To me, that's one of the lowest forms of crimes that can be committed. Unfortunately, and oftentimes, the scam could involve someone that you trust, and even a family member. More times than not, it is someone that is known. And it's important, are we protected from harm? It means self-neglect too. The third one I want to talk about of things to consider. Will I receive the care I need? Perhaps it could be a continuing care retirement facility or aging in place or in your home. I find most people initially start up, everybody wants to stay in their home, or maybe they want to live with a child. What's in your plan? And I think another area that you could look at is number 4 is how will I spend my time? You've worked your whole life raising your family, and you're just not going to stay home and watch TV. Socialization is huge. Are you going to travel, play pickleball with me and my friends, or be quiet at home with a good book? You should give some thought to that. How are you going to spend your time? Are you in the right place geographically to do the things that you want to do? The next thing to consider is, how will I give what I've gained? What do I mean by that? Perhaps a second job, your knowledge, your know-how, finding work in a hobby, or part-time work. I consider part-time work really overlooked at times also. I'm a big fan of a phased retirement. I wonder why more people don't consider this option. You know, first of all, when you go into retirement, you want to preserve that nest egg, most importantly. And secondly, by staying engaged during the early years of retirement, you know, that will elevate a feeling of self-worth and mental acuity. And lastly, a chance to chase your passion or work in your hobby, and even more so, it'll allow you to retain your nest egg, so you won't be withdrawing as much during the earlier years where people tend to spend more of the money in the early years of a retirement. And but you'll also have time to give back to a nonprofit or helping pay for a grandchild's education. But that's what I mean when I say here, how will I give what I've gained? And there's a lot of different options. All right, Rochelle? The big 2 I have down here is caregiving and housing. Those are the 2 biggest considerations as we're faced with things. You know, I always say it's when you're 55 or 65 years old, it's real hard to see yourself at 84. I know I can't, but you know, so it's really important to have that trusted advisor who can help you think about these things. Now, I'll share a personal story if you don't mind. This happened to me several years ago. You know, 7 or 8 years ago. My mom was at 90 years old. She was living independently at a condo out in Bellevue outside of Nashville here. And I'm doing quite well for a while, but she had started to deteriorate a little bit. And me and my 3 siblings, and we're very fortunate that we all live in the area. And together, including my mom, we determined her quality of life, I'm going back to that again, was starting to go downhill a little bit, and her current course. At which time what we did is together we all helped my mom find an adequate assisted living facility that made her feel comfortable and was geographically situated for all of us to help with my mom, but with the primary caregiver, the assisted living facility. Well, me and my siblings were there to help take care of my mom, but we believed it was in her best interest and help when we were not around. Now, my mom lived out her final days the next 3 years at this facility. It was wonderful for her. And I go back, that was for her. That was for our situations, but not everybody has their children within a short distance close by. And with a trusted advisor, it's understanding if you need resources, if you're needed help, it's available to get that help as people plan where they want to be, or if out-of-town caregivers need help. Which brings us back to that consideration. As I mentioned earlier, every individual is different and unique, and someone who is here to help you. In my family, again, we were very fortunate. Sometimes you might have a spouse taking care of each other, or a grandparent. You might be called to help a grandparent or an aunt and uncle. The situations vary, and it's important for those that need the care are not alone, and that there's professionals available to help. like Grace and Grace's organization. I try to help people through the planning process to prepare for emotional and the economic cost of caregiving. During our financial planning process, we run scenarios as it relates to long-term care, assisted living, or home care. We try to determine the economic impact that it could have in relation to quality of life and longevity expectations. In addition, we can connect and help those that need resources for care and support. You know, I want to take just a deeper dive into long-term care. Just a moment. I think Grace and I talked about it recently. I really believe it's best to buy long-term care in your 50s and 60s before potential health concerns and you're not eligible. I believe that long-term care is actually better than it used to be. The reason for that is the majority of the policies written today are asset-based, and they can provide coverage for both individuals and couples. And if you don't use it, you don't lose it. And on a long-term care policy today, the assets can be passed directly to the beneficiaries if not used. The majority of written today are people in their 50s and 60s. Many of those policies are written for individuals that could be replacing life policies for long-term care because someone may no longer need it for life insurance and they have a wider risk, again, back to risk assessment, for long-term care. And lastly, some in their 50s and 60s demographic may have accumulated extra reserves for an emergency, you know, the what if something happened money. By purchasing a long-term care policy, the opportunity presents leverage to their savings by adding long-term care coverage. Again, identify the gap in the plan through the trusted advisor. And before it's too late, if you're thinking about doing it, do it before it's too late, because you don't want to be health ineligible if that happens. But most advisors will help you get through those situations. But that's for consideration number one, is caregiving. Long-term care is a consideration there. The second big number two, as you look at longevity, is housing. As you look at it, as you look at longevity, there's certainly different stages that you go through. Many call the early years of retirement the go-go years. You're spending more money, maybe you're traveling some, and those are some of the best years. Spending time with grandchildren. Well, the next block of years could consider the slow-go years. Maybe you're doing a lot of the same things, but not as frequent. And the final years are the no-go years. Maybe you're not able to get out. The health may have gone down. And so as you're looking at housing, those are things to consider from a planning perspective, to factor in how the needs and wants change through those different stages in your lifestyle, your life. So where do you intend to live your moderate retirement? The early years might be different than the latter years. Most people have that desire to stay placed in their home. Then there's other questions that need to be answered. As you go through the different stages of life, is your home safe for aging in place? You know what I mean? You know, the showers, you know, we see the commercials on TV. Is the kitchen safe? The cabinets right? The bathrooms, rail, and those type of things. Is that the right place? Is that what you want to do? You need to have open dialogue with loved ones, where everybody, you know, is caring and has input to help a parent, or if a parent's in position to help themselves. Those are things to consideration and talk about, and you look at longevity planning. And could the loved one stay? Well, if one desires to stay in the home, would it be a situation? How will support be provided? Okay, so the big two, caregiving and housing. Okay, Rochelle. Unfortunately, in the world, we don't always see the train that hits us, or it's the unexpected that gets us. I want to dive a little bit deeper here below the surface. It's not always the things that we anticipate that cause the problems. I guess you all know what I'm talking about when I say that. If oftentimes we don't see it, that gets us, and that's the things that is below the surface. Healthcare related issues, reliable income streams that you might be counting on that go away, caregiving issues, identity protection or theft or fraud. Insurance wasn't what you thought it would be. Legacy planning. Is it what you thought? Do you have the money? It's very tough out there. The world we live in can be very difficult for older people. It's important to have a plan in place to help reduce the chances of the unexpected. And that's why we think the plans are so important. Okay, Rochelle. I mentioned earlier the importance of quality of life. To me, again, number one thing, everybody's quality of life looks different. How do we answer tomorrow's questions today? That's what we're really trying to do in a plan. What if, what about this? Are you planning for this? What do you want? In my firm, we've identified 5 areas of consideration when planning. Plan, protect, care, thrive, and share. I'll break them down. I'm going to get back to the trustworthy advisor. The most important thing is having this relationship where someone really knows your situation. And again, a good advisor will know your current situation, your future plans, your family dynamic, and your feelings about risk. Planning what is involved in a financial plan that's it. Of course, it's got to be unique. It involves goal setting. Identifies what your life will look like. So I'm talking about, just to go back, I'm talking about the number one thing on here is the plan. The plan is number one, okay? Okay. When you do a plan, you need to quantify the needs and wants. We said that earlier. We also have to identify the reliable income streams like Social Security. I want to talk a little bit more about Social Security. There's a lot of variations on Social Security. When should I take it? Well, there's not should I wait or should I take it now? What about the taxes? There's not a right or wrong answer on that. Obviously, the longer you wait, you can get more. There's that tax implications if you're still earning income early on, if you don't take it at full retirement age. But if someone wants to take it, it's an individual decision. And we've got charts and things like that where we can show you. But at the end of the day, I can show people several ways to take their money. But at the end of the day, if they want their money, they want their money. But I can show them why it could make more sense to wait. But you really don't know for sure when is the best time because we don't know what our longevity is. Okay, but we can put all that out there for people, and you can take a look at it. But so that's about reliable income streams like Social Security, and that's important to a lot of people. In addition, it could be rental property, or you have some annuity that you've annuitized that's creating an income stream. It's important to make sure your advisor does a risk assessment during the plan, and also understands an insurance assessment, which includes long-term care. And a good advisor will also ensure that you understand all the dynamics to the Social Security and optimize that Medicare, that you have a good grasp of Medicare and Social Security, anything that has to do with longevity. A good plan will cover the what ifs, like if the market goes down, if they change Social Security, how does that affect me? You can kind of look at the what ifs just to give people more of a comfort zone. You want people to have a peace of mind. Will this keep you up at night? I hope not. think about, go out there and enjoy yourself. Don't worry about this stuff. A good trusted advisor will help navigate that process. But the thing I want to leave you here on this is, once you do the plan, it's not complete. It's an ongoing, our lives are not complete. Our lives are not static. And because our lives are not static, it's continually updated as life goes on. The second one in the quality of life here to consider is protect. Protect is part of the planning process. Protect of risk assessment relates to some of the various what ifs. Like we've talked about, is your home secure? What are some of the things that protect yourself? Do you have the proper insurance? Care. We talked about that a lot today. Who will take care of you if needed? Or can you afford it? Thrive. We talked about, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to thrive is second. I'm sorry. We had protect, care, thrive is do what you want to do. Enjoy your life. Go out there and do what you want to do. More gardening, golf, be a volunteer in your church or nonprofit, and share. Take time to share your life with your loved ones and others, as well as the opportunity to provide financial resources to others if you so choose. So a trusted advisor will help answer the questions and more of as a guide for you, and listen, to make an emotional connection with a trusted advisor to understand your current situation of what's going on, and try to identify those gaps in your plan to help prepare for the unexpected, those things below the surface. So you can, to plan and protect and thrive and share and help try to plan for the quality of life as you so desire as we take a look at longevity. I want to thank you for allowing me this time, Grace, and I appreciate it. And thank you.
All right, and I want to jump in and say thank you, Grace, as well, for allowing me to be a part of the webinar today. I hope everyone finds it valuable. Where I'm going to come in is commenting on what's going on globally in the economy right now. We're going to touch on some very high-level themes, and I'm going to try to stay out of the weeds for the most part. It's easy to go down some rabbit holes when you're talking about the global financial system, and I don't want anyone's eyes to glaze over here on the webinar today. So we're gonna definitely paint with some broad brushstrokes. But to introduce myself, my name is Jacob Hodges. I work at a firm in Brentwood, Tennessee, Premier Private Wealth. We're an independent fee-only firm here in Middle Tennessee, and we seek to provide value to clients through financial planning. So when we think, just as Gary mentioned while he was speaking, financial planning is incredibly important and something that we think everyone should take the time to invest in. But jumping in on the global financial situation, we are seeing a lot of old school boogeymen being wheeled out of the closets for what's going wrong in the world right now. And one that is particularly hot in the financial media is inflation. It's something that's been in most of the headlines over the last 12 to 18 months, something that coming out of the pandemic, we knew was going to at least be a bit of a supposed to be temporary or transient problem that has been quite a bit more persistent than the federal government would have led us to believe. But I want to talk about the trends that we're seeing here in inflation, because we have not conquered inflation. Inflation is still an issue right now. And just for everyone's context for inflation, inflation is the percentage change of prices year over year. So it is how much did eggs cost last year? How much did eggs cost this year? And that takes into account not only those grocery items, but also goods and services outside of that realm as well. So it averages all those together and essentially tracks the change in price over time. Using eggs was a pretty impactful example a couple months ago, because if everyone remembers, I I believe a dozen eggs was hitting around $6.50 for a dozen eggs there for a little while, which was pretty impactful on my personal grocery budget. I don't know about everyone else, but I was very excited to see that come back down. So we were seeing some pretty dramatic changes in prices in critical goods, in groceries, in the cost of energy such as electricity, gas. Prices were going up and at a rate that was not sustainable. We were seeing it start to encroach on people's spending in such a way that was causing them to have to really curtail the spending in areas of their life that cause enjoyment, such as vacation and other things that they like to buy that aren't necessary to live, but sure make living a lot more pleasant. So talking about the trends that we're seeing, we are seeing inflation start to move in the right direction. So we are actually seeing inflation come down. So the year-over-year change or increase in prices is starting to slow down. That is what we want to see. We hope that we would see that because the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates pretty dramatically over the last year, which has had an impact throughout the economy. And it's something that we are continuing to navigate right now. But hopefully we're going to see a little bit of a slowdown in that, a little bit of a settling of the economy, and we're going to see this inflation continue to come under control. So if you want to go to the next slide. So the next question coming off of the inflation question or what's going on in the economy is, are we going to have a recession? And the short answer to that is yes, we will have a recession eventually. Periods of growth and periods of decline or contraction in the economy are known as bear and bull markets. But what we really wanted to focus on today is that periods of contraction or periods of decline, another word for them is recession. And periods of growth follow periods of contraction, and periods of contraction follow periods of growth. You can't have two different periods of growth without there being a period of contraction in the middle of there, because then you just had one really long period of growth. And we were very fortunate. We went through a very long period of growth where each year we were seeming to go up by double digits in the various indexes and really, experiencing a period of financial prosperity, specifically in the United States. And that was eventually going to come to an end. We were eventually going to have a recession or a period of contraction. We, on paper, had one of those at the beginning of the pandemic. And although some people have called that an artificially engineered recession, it wasn't a true recession because we had some, unforeseen circumstances gridlock our financial or our global economy. But now we're looking at potentially more of a run-of-the-mill recession. The question being then, if we are going to have a recession eventually, how bad is it going to be? And we don't want to go into these financial factors today in depth. And if anyone does have questions about the specifics, I'm happy to address those on a one-on-one basis. But today I want to just say that all the indicators that would tell us how deep and how dark this recession is going to get whenever we do have it down the road, they're telling us it's not going to be that bad. So whenever we are looking at different indicators, we like to look at consumer confidence, which is maintained a very high level. We like to look at business confidence, which is lower, but not quite as low. Those two factors being how confident businesses are or individuals are in going into the economy and spending money on things that they want and need. Obviously, the needs and wants of a business are going to be different than the needs and wants of a household, but from a mechanics perspective in the economy, they both function similarly. We also like to look at what's going on in the stock market in general, and we are seeing some positive trends there. It's been a good year in the market so far, but we're behind the scenes from a technical analysis standpoint. We are seeing some positive trends in valuations and things that would tell us that if we're moving into a period of contraction, companies have solid balance sheets and will be able to weather that without dramatic closures or any other unforeseen, unfortunate influences on the market as a whole. So we might have a recession, but it's probably going to be more of a yellow light recession, not a red light recession. And it's a good reminder that not every recession is 07, 08. That's not a normal recession. They called that a Great Recession for a reason. It was the most intense, dramatic economic pullback since the Great Depression. And it doesn't happen very often. And oftentimes we have these periods of contraction. They're shorter, less deep, more manageable, and they gear us up for another period of growth after that. So if you want to go to the next slide. This is one of my favorite charts. I like to show it in all of my client review meetings if I can. Sometimes when I pull it out, clients like to kind of start to chuckle and say, oh, Jacob's brought out his chart again. So I thought I'd show it today because it's a great one. But this is a chart that's comparing bear markets and bull markets going back to 1949. So a pretty good sample size of years here and a wide variety of different types of markets. The thing that I want to hone in on is the length of bull markets, and bull markets are times of expansion, the height of bull markets versus the relatively shorter time period for bear markets or periods of contraction, and how shallow the bear markets are in comparison to bull markets. So looking at this chart, you can see that each period of green is a period when the economy was growing. It was a bear or is a bull market. Each period of red is a time when the economy was contracting or it was a bear market. And it's pretty obvious that the story here is that if you can ride out these economic storms or weather the ups and downs or the temporary declines, we go up a heck of a lot more than we go down, and we go up for a heck of a lot longer than we go down. And that's it's easy to look at this chart and say, well, obviously all you need to do is just stay buckled in there. Now, what this chart can't quantify is the emotional impact of logging into your investment portal and seeing that your account has contracted dramatically, or having to read headline after headline of negative news talking about how everything in the world is going to stop and how this time it's different and we've never seen anything like this before. And that's when having a solid, well put together financial plan and a great advisor to lean on during times like this is an invaluable resource. Building a plan is important at any point in time. And I'm not condoning, timing when you put your financial plan together. I think you should do it. If you haven't got one, you need to do one next week. And if next week doesn't work, the week after. I mean, as soon as you can. But if you've put one together and you go through one of these periods of economic contraction and you start saying, we need to change something dramatic, that's when I would say call your financial advisor or reach out to one and try not to make big time changes to the ship that you're sailing while you're in the middle of a storm. I recommend getting through a period of rough waters and then maybe making a change after that with the consultation of your advisor to make sure it's not sacrificing other goals or unforeseen circumstances. And Grace, I saw you come off mute. Were you wanting to?
We had a quick question come in. What does the yellow line signify in your chart?
So the yellow line is going to be tracking the federal funds rate over these periods of economic contraction. So oftentimes you'll see it drop during a period of contraction. That's when the Fed is lowering interest rates, and that usually stimulates economic growth because it makes it easier to borrow money. It makes it cheaper for companies to leverage their assets. And then you see it start to tick up during periods of economic expansion or the green periods. And that's when the Fed is trying to get their balance sheet more in order and create a more long-term sustainable debt situation for the US. So you can see if you look over to the right end, tracking that yellow line, it stayed very flat for a long, long time. And we just started to tick that back up recently and in a dramatic fashion over a short period of time. But don't have the most updated version of this chart, but you would see that yellow line start to go up if we had one tracking it day to day. So we can probably go to the next slide there. So moving on from the current market conditions, a big question, and this is a big part of the financial planning piece, and something that Grace wanted me to speak on today is legacy planning or estate planning. I went in and I listed some of the really critical documents that you would want to address with an estate attorney or discuss with your financial advisor. The first one being a will, and the second one being a power of attorney. And then the others being more of a ancillary or, possible things that you would want to navigate with your attorney. But with powers of attorney, something that I've always found interesting is when I ask someone about estate planning, they're like, yeah, I've got my will and power of attorney. And I always ask, well, what kind of power of attorney? And I can immediately, there's usually a very quiet answer where nobody really, follows up with anything. And that's because estate planning is pretty complex. There's various legal documents that can be put in place to serve very specific purposes. There's a durable versus a general power of attorney, which has to do with the cognitive ability of the individual that has put that document in force. You can actually have a power of attorney that once you become mentally impaired or unable of making your own decisions, that document becomes null and void, which really would be when you need someone to be able to step in and make decisions on your behalf in your benefit. And then there's a medical versus a financial power of attorney, which are general terms that mean exactly what you think. You have someone who can make decisions for you medically, or you have someone that can step in and make decisions for you financially. If your power of attorney is limited in any way, they might find themselves in a very challenging situation if you're not capable of making decisions for yourself. I'm not condoning any specific one of these types of power of attorney, but it's something that you would want to discuss both with your advisor and your attorney to make sure that what you have in place is doing what you think it is doing. Another great step for estate planning is a beneficiary review. This is everything from old insurance policies all the way through to your IRAs or any sort of employer plans. Anything that you have a beneficiary notated on, you want to make sure that it is what you want it to be. Every advisor, every insurance agent has at least one horror story where someone passed away, unfortunately, and meant to get around to updating their beneficiaries, never did. And once they pass away, whoever's notated on that beneficiary is binding. So if you don't update it, and if you have, the situation that I can reflect back on wasn't to me specific, wasn't the advisor specifically, but it was a colleague of mine. It was an ex-spouse was listed as the beneficiary on the insurance policy, and that person had remarried and just never got around to updating their beneficiary. And instead of the current spouse getting those life insurance funds, it went to the ex-spouse, and there was nothing legally that they could do. And the ex-spouse did not donate those back to the new spouse. They retained those assets. So that's something that you want to avoid. And it's very easy, very quick, typically, to update beneficiaries. Quick call to your advisor or whoever is the insurance agent on your policy should be able to remedy any inaccurate beneficiaries quickly. Insurance coverage is just another form of risk management that is important if you are able to get it. This is something that Gary already touched on, so I'm not going to get too deep into this discussion, but long-term care insurance, life insurance, those are critical pieces of a well put together financial plan, and something that you should at least have a discussion on with your advisor to make sure that if there's any opportunity to mitigate risk there, that you're making sure you're covered in the right place. Trust planning is something I get a question about a lot, especially when I'm having this estate planning conversation with clients. It's not always necessary or appropriate for a client to put together to put a trust in place, but sometimes it is. It really has to do with A, how much assets you're dealing with, and B, how much control you want to have over what are done with those assets after you pass. The trust gives you quite a bit of latitude in what can and can't be done with the money that you pass on after your death. And it may be something that serves a purpose or accomplishes a goal of yours if you're trying to use that. So in the next slide then, the last thing we want to address really quickly is the scams and exploitation, which I know Grace and her team do a phenomenal job of talking about this regularly. So I would be, remiss to not recommend reading or subscribing to the Scam of the Month newsletter that AgeWell sends out. I think it's phenomenal material, very up to date on what is currently being used to target the elderly and people who may or may not be exploited. But I'll go through a couple other tactics that these individuals use, and just go over best practices or good things to filter through what may or may not be real. So email phishing, we get these all the time. I get fake email addresses on a regular basis. It's always a good practice to just glance up at the email address it is coming from. A lot of times these scammers are very sophisticated in the way that they can imitate the email formats from various organizations or individuals. So an email may look legitimate in the email itself, but if you glance up at the address that the email is coming from, it may be an 35 number long email address that's very clearly not the person that you have thought you received the email from. So that a quick glance up there is a great practice. Also, if something is an odd request or kind of out of the blue, before you never click any links in the email itself, unless you know for a fact that that person is emailing you. But don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call someone. I had done this regularly for my grandfather-in-law. He regularly gets hacked on various platforms, and I'm getting friend requests and emails, and I know him well enough to know that he does not, he's not emailing me and requesting that I send him Google Play gift cards. That he wouldn't do that. So when I reach out to him directly, it not only keeps me from making a mistake, but also allows him to know that something is compromised in his personal cybersecurity, and he can take steps to remedy that. Fake text. Oftentimes I'm getting texts on a regular basis from numbers that I don't have saved. Sometimes they are very personal in nature and they're asking me questions or pretending to know who I am. As a general rule, if I get a text without any context or an introduction from a number that I don't have saved, I delete that text and report it as spam immediately. If someone really needs to get in touch with you and they're not going to stop, they'll call you and leave you a voicemail, or they will reach out to you through someone else and you'll be able to very quickly add them into your contact book, and that won't happen again. So ignore those texts, even if they're pretending like they know you're met you. Venmo requests or other cash transfer apps are a very common scam right now. They are people sending small amounts of money and then messaging you over that app and claiming to have sent that in error and requesting you send that back. The way to solve that is to not do anything. Don't message the person back and don't send the money back either. It's usually a very, very small dollar amount, sometimes not less than $1 itself. Venmo will resolve that, and typically they'll reach out to you directly if they need you to send the money back, but sending the money to them gives them access to some of your bank data and can compromise your account security on those apps. Two-factor authentication is something that is a great best practice to avoid scams and various types of phishing attempts. This is when you add your phone number into your portal, and whenever you sign in, they send you a text that gives you a code, and you type that code in. If you are given or prompted to set up two-factor authentication for any sort of portal, I highly recommend doing it. Something that I did not know and that I've learned recently is that account ownership, when two-factor authentication is involved, is attributed to whoever's phone number is put in for the two-factor auth. So if you decline to set up two-factor authentication and someone was able to hack into your profile and put their phone number into that two-factor auth and then change your password, you would legally no longer own that account. So that's something that I highly recommend. Always do the two-factor authentication. It's a great best practice and stops a lot of the hacking and scam opportunities that people would have right there on at the gate. And then having a trusted third party is a great practice as well. I recommend having your advisor be that person, but someone that you can reach out to for advice if any of these come through that you are questioning. So we had some clients get letters about it was a shareholder meeting about a specific stock that they were holding. And it turned out that those were fraudulent, but they sent those to us directly. And it was just a handful. By the time we got the first one, we were able to track down the right people in our back office support and have a pretty robust, effective report done on what was going on. And when the rest of them called in, we already had the answers. So I recommend having a trusted third party, somebody who's willing to figure out what's going on if you feel like you're being taken advantage of or scammed, and then leaning on that person to do the due diligence and make sure you can avoid any issues. And I believe that's all that I've got. So I think Jen's gonna hop on now, but thank you, Grace. Really appreciate the opportunity and happy to answer any other questions.
Yeah, thanks, Grace. I will not take very long, so we have time for questions and answers, but I think that I am very much like a lot of people out there in that I really wish that somebody had told me when I was younger and starting to make my own money that, we have to start planning for the future. I grew up surrounded with other Eastern European immigrants who, we didn't have the money to invest at that point. So it was not an education point growing up. Pass that along to my children. Did not talk about finances, going into the military. We didn't have the money either. And becoming a young mom and spending everything I made on my children, I did not have that opportunity nor the knowledge to do that. So now, as I'm starting to be worried about what I'm leaving my children and not wanting to leave them my debts and hoping to leave them something when I'm gone, I'm finding myself behind the curve and having to make up for some things, make allowances for other things, such as depending on the VA as a veteran for long-term care. Not that that's my first choice, but that's an allowance that I'll have to make for myself if I'm not able to make up that money to save for my children. So, getting behind on 401k and life insurance, all the things that both of these gentlemen talked about today. It's not too late to start planning. And even though, I found myself embarrassed to ask for help. I'm well educated, but I knew nothing about finances and afraid to ask for help from others. And so this is something that, if others are afraid to ask for that help, there are people out here like Gary and Jacob that can help set those goals for you and tell you what you need. And I'm going to actually reach out as well to start my trust and my planning as well. So Grace, we can go to Q&A since we have a couple minutes left.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate your candor and I'm in the same boat, thinking I haven't saved enough. I've got a lot of work to do as well. And you know, Gary, you mentioned times it can be tough out there. And I think with the economy the way it is, inflation, many of us are wondering, you know, either realizing now we haven't saved enough and trying to catch up, or realizing perhaps that you don't have enough saved, you're already retired, and what can you do? So I wanted to share a few resources. One of the things we try to do in these webinars is share community resources. And these are some that I think are particularly relevant for our topic today. The United Way offers a financial empowerment center for Nashville residents. And this is a wonderful resource, regardless of age or income level, that any Nashville resident can take advantage of for one-on-one confidential assistance, whether it's financial counseling or help with budgeting. This is a wonderful community benefit that is available to Nashville residents. I also appreciate Jacob mentioning our Scam of the Month, and which you can sign up for on our website. We also offer a directory of services, which is available for free to older adults and family caregivers in 13 counties and available at all public libraries. So if you don't have a copy of our directory of services, I highly encourage you to go to your local public library or call our office, and we're happy to provide you with a copy of our directory. You can sign up for our Scam of the Month emails. We only send one a month, so you won't be bombarded. And it is a free service that we offer to the community so that all of us can stay aware of the latest scams and how to protect ourselves. And then lastly, the National Council on Aging is really focused on economic security, and they offer a couple of online tools that I wanted to mention: the AgeWell Planner and Benefits Checkup. So you can Google National Council on Aging online and find those tools. You can find out if you might qualify for benefits that can help stretch your money a little further, and just wanted to mention those. We want to thank our partners again for this webinar series: Encore Ministry, Jewish Family Service, and the YMCA. And once again, thank our sponsors for today's webinar. Greater Nashville Regional Council has sponsored the Keys to Living and Aging Well series, and Jackson sponsored today's webinar. So thank you again to these sponsors for making this series and today's webinar possible. This session is being recorded, as have our previous webinars. So you can go to agewelltn.org and look for under resources for our webinar library, and you'll be able to see this recording and also the previous webinars that we've offered on a variety of topics, from physical health, mental health, nutrition, some wonderful information that we hope you will check out. Here is our information. Please feel free to call AgeWell if we could ever be of assistance. I want to thank Gary and Jacob and Jenn for being part of today's program. You all have provided excellent information for us. And I think we all have a greater appreciation now of the importance of planning ahead and finding a trusted advisor to work with for many years, and help shape our plans for our future, and really dive into what's most important to us and what's unique about our situation. So thank you again for joining us today. Thank you, Gary, Jacob, and Jenn, for being our panelists. And we wish you all well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Grace.
Mm-hmm.